Welcome to Coffee Processing Talks. My name is Alejandro Damian. I am a Q Arabica grader and also I teach about post-harvest processing. In this first episode, my guest is a brilliant coffee producer from Honduras. His name is Ruben Sorto. He is a very generous person because he likes to share his knowledge and everything they do in Honduras, where he leads his company called Biofortune Crops. In this episode, we talk about coffee processing, specifically about fermentation, but mostly about dry process of coffee. The post-harvest processing is considered one of the most important stages in quality of coffee. Some researchers, like Casey O'Keefe, who created the quality formula for coffee, consider that you create value in the plant, and after harvest, you have to improve that quality by preserving all the attributes that the plant already has given you. This is what we're going to talk about with Ruben Sorto, and I hope you like. Thank you very much for watching.
The O'Keefe and IFT equation considers the pre-harvest fact, the 40% that I described initially on that equation was basically altitude, latitude, topography, the varietal, the coffee varietal, the quality of the seeds, the quality of the soils, the type of fertilization that you provide, if you provide irrigation, which is very common in Brazil, or if you depend on rains, which is what you will see in Central America and in Mexico. Climate change has become a very important factor because of the amount of radiation that you get and the increase in temperature. And from that, it depends on how much sunlight you get from day to day, or if you have an agroforestry model that can provide shade, how you control pathogens, if you are an organic farmer or if you're not, how you control those pathogens is definitely a very important variable that affects the coffee quality. And finally, the practices during harvest, how you monitor the ripening of your fruit. So, and these are just the pre-harvest factors that affect coffee quality. Not only O'Keefe, but Hamid, a researcher based in Indonesia, published an article back in 2019 that specifically said that those numbers, established those numbers. 40% of the coffee quality will depend in the pre-harvest factors, and 60% will depend on post-harvest factors. But unfortunately, and this is something that I think that you will share with me, coffee farmers have focused on the pre-harvest, on only getting the 40% variables, trying to get them right, doing them right. But that only provides less than half of the coffee quality variables. And in the post-harvest variables, you will find the fermentation process, either wet or honey or the natural processes. And this has become, has attracted a lot of attention. Many farmers now are experimenting with derivations and variations of these basic processes. Some of them, I would agree with them, or some of them, I would agree with the type of processes. Maybe carbonic maceration makes a lot of sense. There is a lot of science behind it. But some others, I'm maybe more orthodox, and I would not agree with all the practices talking about specifically about fermentation. For example, lactic fermentation. I've seen many farmers using salt solutions, adding salt solutions into the fermentation, which is a practice that you may see on some vegetables. It's called the pickle fermentation, but that is not a practice that I would agree upon on coffee, definitely, because it will affect the final flavor of coffee. Yes. And there are other pathways in order to get a lactic fermentation. Then there's the drying process. The drying process, many people haven't focused on drying. I don't know, maybe 95% of the coffee farmers still do it in patios. Some of them on African beds, some others on greenhouses. And O'Keefe and the IFT established that those variables that I mentioned, fermentation, how you handle it, and how you prepare your final cup, you assign a 60% of the coffee cup quality, which is larger than the pre-harvest processes. Yes, definitely. Casey O'Keefe did a superb job establishing some of the bases. But now you will find a richer version of that basic equation on how you achieve coffee quality.
Fermentation, as you mentioned, became like everybody wanted to have fermentation in order to fix their quality. If this can be fixed, which is not the case. But then we forgot about something we always had, like which is the dry stage, the dry process of coffee. Based on what we've been discovered, apparently lately, I've seen many gurus in the world saying that let's forget about fermentation, let's forget about funky flavors, and then let's go back to the basics, which is how we can improve our drying process based on what we already have.
Well, it's very important. Each and every single step that we just described are very important. And I agree with you. Let's not talk about points. The 90 point threshold. Let's not talk about it. Let's talk about sensorial attributes, the flavors and the aromas that are appreciated by roasters and by end consumers. Those flavors and unique aromas are affected by every single step that you take. Those flavors and aromas definitely are affected by the pre-harvest factors that we mentioned, but of course are created during fermentation, basically because they are precursors or raw materials on the cherry or inside the bean that are transformed into end products, metabolites, specific chemicals that provide a specific flavor, a mango flavor or a peach flavor or a floral note, a floral aroma. Going back 6 years ago, it really impressed me a phrase that I found on this paper that I shared with you. These researchers from European and Asian academic institutions were testing how they could compare the sun-dried coffee, the convection dried coffee on trays, the African bed dried coffee, the heat pump dried coffee. A heat pump, by the way, heat pump dryers have existed for over 40 years now. Mm-hmm. And how different types of drying technologies, drying processes affected pH, total solids, the caffeine content, comparing vis-a-vis every coffee. And of course, those sensorial notes that we were describing, that we were talking about. And the phrase that impacted me the most was that, and I'm going to paraphrase it, the results indicated that the heat pump drying method was superior in preserving ketones, phenols, and esters. I think that that phrase, yes, it's a kick on the desk of authority, and it defines that there is an advantage of preserving those metabolites, those chemical compounds that make a cup unique. Based on that paper, there are more than 100 documents that I've seen that support this assertion that the heat pump drying process provided an important competitive advantage. I must say that I have compared, we have compared at our operations here in Honduras, how a coffee that comes from the same lot, from the same farm, which is the same varietal, which has been fermented with the same process, and we have separated those lots into different samples and compared how the drying process is affected using different technologies. And there is a rationale behind all these scientific research papers that establish that this technology provides an advantage. And it is summarized in one single word: variability. It eliminates variability. And which are these variables that you need to control during drying? Temperature, wind speed, relative humidity, dry and wet bulb conditions, the rate at which you dry a material, and all these variables that happen during the drying process will affect three specific variables that measure the quality of your drying process: water content, water activity, AW, and the metabolites that you have in your finished product, in your bean. If you don't have clarity on the links between all these variables that I mentioned during the drying process with the three variables that I mentioned, definitely you will not have the complete picture of how important it is to dry consistently and with no variability. If you leave your coffee in a patio, the temperatures will go up during the day and the temperatures will go down during the night. That is variability. Humidity will go down during the day and will go up during the night. The wind speed, since drying, it's a physical chemical process that is affected by the wind speed. And the wind, you will have wind during the day because it depends on the sunlight, but you will not have enough wind speed during the night. So if you don't have the vision that variability will affect the quality on the finished product, on the bean, drying stage, everything you could have done everything perfectly on the pre-harvest stage, and you could have done a great job during fermentation, could have measured Brix and pH and dissolved oxygen and temperature, but you can spoil all your work on the drying stage. And that's the importance of the drying. And of course, the next steps after drying, you need to preserve the quality on every single step.
Going from drying in patio, raised beds, or African beds, maybe mechanical drying or heat pump. I'm understand that you're talking about the variables and how you can reduce the impact on this process. Yeah, I mean how you can control these variables and then how those become more like an ally for you. It is a big jump from going from patio to raised beds, but going from raised beds into some kind of mechanical drying or another equipment, we're talking about like big stuff here, yeah?
Yes, it is a big jump from patios and to African beds. And another jump, it's to mechanical drying. But most important, and this is where I think that all of us agree, is that it is important to keep records. It is important to have written documentation where you keep information about what was the temperature of the bean at 7 a.m., what was the temperature of the beans on a patio at 10 a.m., at 12 p.m., at 3 p.m. And if you are at a place where you're getting a lot of sunlight and where you are getting an increase in temperature going from, let's say, 20 Celsius, and it goes up to above 40, There is a delta of 20 degrees. That is huge, not only for the coffee bean. There is a very common friend that both of us have at the University of Labras and another one at the University of Paraná. Whatever temperature that it's not comfortable for you, it will not be comfortable for the coffee bean. So staying during a whole day at a patio, trust me, at 2 p.m., you will suffer it. It's the same thing with the coffee bean. There is another variable, which is, let's not say more sophisticated, but it's more scientific. There is a degradation on the volatile metabolites due to UV, ultraviolet light. Mm-hmm. You're going to get that type of light on a patio, on a raised bed, but you will not get it on a closed chamber where it's basically a dark process. And there are some myths about drying products under the dark conditions. It's basically because of the absence of ultraviolet light. The UV affects the covalent bonds on specific metabolites. And of course, for example, let's say D-limonene, which is a common trait on some coffees, on a geisha, for example. The D-limonene is tied to other metabolites. And if you have it on a patio, the D-limonene will, that chemical bond will break down and it will volatilize. But if you do it under dark conditions, under controlled conditions, consistent conditions, without the variability on temperature and all the other variables that I mentioned, trust me, a huge difference on the quality of the coffee bean and the cup.
I wanna hear your take on this about the importance of a fast, dry, or loss of humidity in the 3 or 4 days, beginning the dry process, and the other end, the importance not to expose this coffee bean beyond 40 degrees Celsius. It's like, how do I do this fast? And how do I keep the bean away from being affected by high temperatures?
The speed, the rate at which you dry, it will affect the end product on a specific material or on any material. I agree that the drying rate, you need to handle it carefully. There is, for food engineers or food chemists, there is an engineering concept, a basic concept, which is the isotherm curve. The isotherm curve, it's basically the rate at which you are moving humidity, water molecules from the inside of a material to the outside. Because we need to understand that this is a transport phenomena. Drying is a transfer phenomena, moving humidity, water molecules from the inside of the coffee bean to the exterior. So yes, it does affect the quality. If you do it at a fast pace, probably you will keep some of the humidity and you will trap some of the humidity, some of those water molecules inside the bean. Having said that, here it comes how two variables that most farmers handle: water content and water activity. You may have a perfect water content, let's say 10.5% water content, but you may have some of that water content trapped inside either the cherry or the bean, and having that water activity above the 0.65 threshold. that water is available for microbial activity. And either bacteria or yeast, you don't want a specific bacteria and yeast that will deteriorate the quality of your product. So you need to understand that there is a balance. You need to handle a balance between water content and water activity. And it is affected by the rate at which you dry coffee beans and any other food material. There is, of course, a perfect zone. Let's call it a perfect zone, under which you have both. There is a graph that I shared with you that establishes that between 0.45 up to 0.65 of water activity and having the other axis between maximum 12% water content up to 9.5 water content, it will give you it will preserve the sensorial quality of your coffee bean, but not only that, it will prolong the shelf life of the product because you need water for the roasting process, but you don't need too much water because it will deteriorate the quality of the coffee bean or the coffee cherry if it's a natural. So you need to find an equilibrium for those two variables.
And I understand that water activity is not easy to measure. I mean, there's equipments that are not financially accessible to everyone. Mm-hmm. But if you dry faster or too high temperatures, you will get below that rate, below 0.45 of water activity measure. If you do it too slow, it will take more days for you to dry or to get to that 11% of moisture. Then you will have a water activity above 0.65. Even ECA recommends or considers okay above up to 0.7, which is most of the time I've seen is too high. Because there's going to be first, as you said, more easy for microbial activity above that threshold. And below that, the bean is going to be deteriorated, which is going to be affected by the integrity of the bean, by the extreme heat the bean was exposed to. Let's say we don't have a tool that we measure, but nowadays I think it is important to have that kind of tool. If we take care of the appropriate rate of drying process, most of the time we're going to get that window of 0.45 to 0.65. How do you think water activity can be used in favor in terms of like when they stop the drying process at, let's say, 18% of humidity or 20, and it's considered safe for the bean maybe to stabilize and to put it into the shades before putting back into the raised beds or to continue the dry process. The water activity in that point is kind of high. Still, it's not in the specific threshold. What's your take on this? Do you think it can be used for some microbial activity that might transform into some metabolites, or that's kind of crazy?
I've seen different approaches on how you can control water activity without having the equipment, the water activity meter. Yeah. Without having that equipment, and let me say to you that nowadays prices have gone down on analytical equipment substantially.
True.
Maybe 5 years ago, you would find a water activity meter for a price of, I don't know, $5,000. But portable water activity meters nowadays may cost you around $500. So having said that, another way in which you can control water activity is by the rate at which you are losing weight. Playing with some words as a game of words, but let me explain it. Let's talk about a depulped coffee. A depulped coffee will lose maybe around between 52 up to 55% of the original cherry weight. And during the first 48 hours after you have depulped it, and after you have fermented, you will still have a microbial activity, but those 48 hours, when you put your coffee on patios or raised beds, the amount of water that the bean will lose and the rate at which you are losing it, it's quite high, meaning that you may go down from 55% humidity up to 35% humidity between 48 up to 72 hours. That fast. At an average 25 to 30 degrees Celsius temperature, environmental temperature. And still, there is enough evidence to say that you will still have some fermentation during that stage. And after that, you will start the oxidation process, where it becomes tricky to understand and to measure the rate, the proper rate at which you must dry. It's from that 35% as low as 18 or 15% water content. That becomes very tricky because the rate, the speed at which the coffee beans are losing water content, it slows down, and it depends on the environmental factors. But again, just by having a scale, and if you measure it at the same hour of the day, let's say you take a measurement at 5 p.m., just before the night. Every single day, you will have an idea how fast you are losing that water content. If you don't observe a decrease on the rate at which you are drying, at which the coffee beans are losing humidity, you are drying it too fast. The conditions are not adequate. We still have a raised bed at our facility, and we still use them. A very simple tactic in which you can control the speed, the drying speed. If there's too much sunlight, if the days are too dry or too warm, you can put on the cover of your solar dryers some saran, which will provide some shade and reduce the temperature and reduce, of course, the rate at which you are drying. So basically, you can control it without having the equipment, just by measuring the weight, the speed at which you are drying it. That can be done by almost every farmer. If you are drying it on patios, you can do it. You can still use some shade on the patio, and you will be able to control the rate at which you are drying.
If you apply fermentation to your coffee beans, the behavior of the dry process is going to be different, correct? It's going to be because there's a biochemical transformation in that bean. Most of the people don't consider this. I still yet to know why, but I know it dries faster.
Having controlled fermentation conditions, you will be able to transform biochemical and microbiological process to be done on an orderly fashion way. Let's use that phrase. You will be able to optimize the process under which you are converting sugars, the bricks that you measure, into sensorial nodes. And you will be able to exhaust all the raw materials and convert them, and of course, increase the sensorial experience, because there is a higher percentage of esters, a higher percentage of alcohols, a higher percentage of aldehydes, of ketones, and all these chemicals that provide sensorial notes. It was a myth that if you do controlled fermentation, you will dry the product faster. But there is a scientific logic behind it. If you use all the raw materials more efficiently, all the sugars, all the water, inside the cherry or all the mucilage on the pulp coffee, because you control fermentation and you are boosting the way in which the microbial load is using all those raw materials and converting them into metabolites. You will have less water to extract from the cherry or from the bean, naturally, because you have converted all those raw materials into finished products. So, and you have done it more efficiently. You have removed the mucilage more efficiently. So you will have less water to evaporate. That's the scientific reason why the drying process may be faster. It's not that it's faster. It's
There's
that
less water
sure,
to lose.
there's less water, basically. Yeah, it's a mass balance equilibrium that basically you did it more efficiently.
Yeah, so it doesn't start at the same point for an ordinary process, correct?
Exactly. Just by having, let's say, instead of having 52 or 55% water humidity, you start with 47, starting 5 points less. It will dry faster.
You mentioned about the UV impact on a coffee bean, and that takes us to now to the following question, which is dehydrators. And when and how, with what purposes you decided that this will be a technique that it will be applied for all the varietals you have, or some specific ones you want to achieve a certain quality?
In our case, we do a selection. There are some coffees that some varietals that our customers ask a specific score or a specific sensorial profile, which do not require as much care, let's say as much care as other varietals. Let's talk about a commercial coffee, and let's not use a varietal, a specific varietal, but that commercial coffee will need to be on a score between 81 up to 83. That coffee can be dried on a raised bed or on a greenhouse. It does not require that much energy input, but there are some other coffees, specific coffees, and for specific sensorial experiences where our roaster asks for, I want this coffee to have a peach note or a malolactic acidity, or so you need to take other measures in order to secure those sensorial. And this is where you start choosing the technology that you can use in order to dry a specific varietal, a specific coffee with a specific sensorial profile, and in order to secure it. Our dryers, you can control all the variables that I was mentioning. These are heat pump dryers. Heat pump drying is basically the technology that air conditioners use nowadays. So one of the advantages of the heat pump dryers is that they are energy efficient. You use less kilowatts per unit in order to dry. And you don't need heat in order to dry. It's basically based on the principle that you don't dry by convection, by increasing temperature. You dry by removing humidity from an environment and transporting and condensing that humidity on a machinery. There are several components on a heat pump dryer, which it includes a condenser. So basically, you control the speed at which the airflow is moved inside the chamber, and it transports water molecules into a condenser. And the condenser moves that humidity outside of the chamber. It works exactly the same way as an air conditioner that you may have in your office or at your home, and you are basically moving humidity. you are not drying by raising temperature. So we don't dry at high temperatures. So the volatiles that we want to preserve, which have a specific temperature threshold under which they will break down and volatilize, we don't get up to that temperature, meaning that we can dry at consistently 30 degrees, 35 degrees Celsius, 28 degrees, it depends. You dry at cool temperatures, but you are using the other variables, the airflow speed, the water content of the air, of course, the temperature. These are closed chambers. So these are dark rooms. There are no lights inside the chamber. And you asked me about the UV. The UV for specific products, it basically breaks down the chemical bonds that tie these volatiles into the trigonylene or the caffeine or all the acids that you may have on your coffee bean. So the chamber provides you with something that I also mentioned, variability, control. You control the process. You are not dependent under the environmental conditions. You don't depend on how much sunlight you're getting. You don't depend on the airflow you're getting outside on the environment. You don't depend on the relative humidity of the air, which is the water content on the air. You control the variables. Control, you reduce variability, and which is the advantage. You are getting consistent and repeatable results.
How many days it takes for a natural processed coffee that usually, let's say, it will take for 25, 30 days to dry on raised beds or in these dehydrators?
A 25-day process for a natural, you will reduce it to five days at 25 Celsius.
I've seen photos of how the integrity of the bean can just melt down because it's exposed to high temperatures or a faster dry. Have you done this sort of a compression in your lots?
Yes. Just recently, just this morning, I had a geisha that was dried 14 months ago. And it was kept on a grain probe bag, sealed, but the color, the flavor, and the aroma, it may have dropped maybe 1 point, 1.5 point, but not 3-5 points. That consistency and the shelf life, that shelf life of the product. And this is something that I would like to highlight. If you dry it under variable conditions, and if you don't store the product under vacuum conditions on a vacuum bag, I'm very sure that after 6 months, the coffee will not taste the same. It will not taste the same. The end product that you get, it's and one of the advantages of using technology, it's you extend the shelf life of a product. That's what it happens to a well-dried coffee under these conditions. That's for the naturals. For the pulp coffees or wet processed coffees, again, between 25 to 30 degrees. If you keep the rate at a constant rate, probably you can dry it at 3 to 4 days.
What kind of varietals do you grow in Honduras, in these Biofortune crops?
We have 24 different varietals, SL14, SL17, SL28, both green tip and bronze tip, SL34, Java, Geisha, both green tip and bronze tip, yellow and red Pacamara, yellow and red Icatú, yellow and red Catuai, Parainema centroamericano, Star Maya, Pacamara, a varietal garden. That's what
Good.
how we define our coffee farms.
And how long you guys been since you inaugurated this company?
We started operations 10 years ago, but our plant started operations only 5 years ago. I think that we were pioneers. We have taken a lot of risks, measured risks, of course. Let me share you just a 30-second anecdote. I started dreaming of this food facility because it's not a coffee mill. It's a food facility. It's a food processing facility. And I started dreaming of this food facility back in 2017, 2018. And I think it was at Guatemala on a conference. But just by coincidence, I was sharing my conference just before one of the most prominent names in the coffee business, a Panamanian coffee grower that has the world record on coffee price. You and I know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I told him, look, we will install bioreactors in order to ferment coffee. He didn't had any coffee, any bioreactors. And we will install heat pump dryers in order to do that. And he said, wow, big. First, skeptically, he said something like, how much money are you're putting into that?
That's what came to my mind, actually.
Yes. And I told him a couple of $1 million. You're crazy. It's too much. And to make the story short, because I said that it was a 30-second anecdote, he has followed our steps. We were the first ones that used bioreactors. He built some smaller, of course, smaller bioreactors under which he controls temperature and oxygen levels, or he even uses carbonic maceration nowadays. And just a couple of years ago, he started doing dark drying, which is basically he's using some ventilators. He's quite skillful, and instead of buying the technology, he's put together a dark room.
Yeah, they do themselves. Yeah.
And it works perfectly. But my point here is the technology that we use, yes, of course, I think it's the dream of many coffee farmers. It requires a lot of capital investment, but more than that, it requires a lot of science, a lot of knowledge, a lot of technology. You need to know what are the reasons, what is the science behind every single decision that we have taken. We don't use the equipment just for coffee drying or coffee fermentation. We believe in value-added products, highly value-added products. Many people are really happy and excited about what's happening in the market with the coffee price. For the first time in 40 years, we are looking at prices over $3 per pound of coffee. But I was just drinking a cascara concentrate beverage, which, by the way, a beverage company in the US is now buying. I joke around and tell my partners and a couple of friends, we win the Cup of Excellence every single day, every single month, with every single shipment of the cascara concentrate, because our product sells for over $100 per gallon. So technology opens the door for highly value-added products. What we have tried to do is share all this knowledge with the coffee community. We don't believe in keeping all these as secrets, and no, we share with the community. We have published a large amount of information and shared with the coffee community because we believe that coffee farmers have to be successful on every single stage where we have acquired some experience.
It's exactly what I said in my intro I recorded before we connected, saying that I admire from you just not the knowledge, but the willing to share information, your generosity to share information with the coffee community, which I thank you for that. Talking to you is talking to the future. And I know you are your company is very much into the regenerative agriculture by reusing lots of byproducts that coffee gives you. And and I keep saying this because I've known you for a couple of years, and I keep telling your story to others, saying like, while you're still focused only bean, there's people already taking advantage of other things, byproducts that the coffee gives you. And you guys are a great example for that. So thank you again for your time and for your generosity, and looking forward to see you again.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And it's been my pleasure. Please, anytime. And if you have some time in Central America, come and visit us.